Kai walked unsteadily under the gray morning light, spilling across the mountain slope. The soil beneath his feet was damp. The wind dragged small stones, and the mist wandered over the ridges like a spirit. His breath grew heavy with guilt left over from the night, and the darkness gathering in his chest curled a little tighter around his neck with every step. The voice of his bad habits seemed to whisper from within him, from his shadow, even from between the stones he walked on. "You're running again, Kai. You're drifting from yourself again. You'll give up before you even begin." The voice was mocking, familiar, an echo that had dragged him into the same swamp for years. Kai lifted his head. In the distance, on a peak surrounded by clouds, a lone hut appeared. Its wooden roof had endured time. A thin strand of smoke rose softly, and the wind carried a warmth that smelled like incense. Somewhere inside him, he felt a pull he couldn't explain. He quickened his steps, but the shadow voice pushed even harder. "Where do you think you're going? Do you really think you can save yourself?" The wind grew harsher, branches twisted, Kai's cloak whipped behind him. It felt like a warning, yet he kept moving, because he was tired, because he was drained, because he could no longer carry the weight of the years he had lost. When he reached the front of the hut, he noticed the old man standing by the door. The man stood straight, his gaze fixed into the wind without a single tremor. It was as if the mountain itself had taken form, carving decades of wisdom into a single face. This was Horan, but Kai didn't know that yet. Horan's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at the young traveler's trembling hands, his muddy shoes, the weary soul gasping behind his breath. Kai wanted to speak, but the words knotted in his throat. A faint shame, a hidden collapse. The smoke of anger he held toward himself drifted around him, and all he could do was lower his head. In that moment, Horan's voice cut through the mountain silence, short, firm, sharp like a blade. "The weight you carry," he said, "is not yours. Your habits tied it to your back years ago." Kai lifted his head, eyes brimming yet stubborn. "I want to change," he said. His sentence was weak. Even the wind might have laughed and torn it apart. His bad habits immediately whispered, "You? Change? How many times have you said that, Kai? How many times did you start and quit?" Kai tried to silence the voice within, but he couldn't. Horan seemed to read the storm inside him. He walked slowly and stood directly in front of Kai. His gaze pierced through the depths of the worn-out soul. Then Horan spoke a sentence that would split Kai's life into two. "Great changes hide behind small actions." Kai felt this wasn't an ordinary piece of advice. The mountain grew a little quieter. The wind softened. It was as though nature itself paused to listen to Horan's words. The muddy weight of past days began to churn in Kai's mind. Abandoned intentions, repeated mistakes, fears he fled from at night, promises sworn in the morning and broken by dusk. His bad habits were invisible chains looping around him, but in the old master's eyes, somewhere, a door seemed to have cracked open. Horan placed a hand on Kai's shoulder. The touch was lighter than expected, yet its effect burned through his chest like fire. "If you walked all the way here," he said, "then a part of you is not dead yet." Kai noticed how each wrinkle on the old man's face looked like it belonged to a battle long gone. This man knew pain, knew transformation, knew how a person could lose to their own shadow. But he also knew how to turn shadows into light. Kai couldn't speak. He only bowed his head. This bow was not surrender, nor acceptance. It was the first answer to a calling. Horan turned toward the hut and motioned silently for him to follow. Kai hesitated. The shadow voice whispered once more, "You don't belong here. You'll fail again." But this time, Kai didn't step back. For the first time, he realized how familiar and how barren that voice truly was. "I'll start again," he said inwardly, "because there is no other way." Horan pushed the door open. A faint scent of incense drifted out. The warmth of the wooden floor contrasted with the world the wind had left outside. As Kai stepped in, he saw the old master turn to look at him one last time. Horan's gaze wasn't asking, "Are you ready?" Because readiness didn't matter. It simply announced that the path had begun. In that moment, Kai felt this encounter wasn't a coincidence. The mountain, the master, this moment, they were all calling him. The first spark to break the chains of his decayed habits was igniting here. Kai took a deep breath. Even the tremble in it felt like his shadow realizing it had been seen. And thus the story began. A wanderer seeking to rise from darkness. A master who spoke through silence. And a doorway to great transformation hidden in small steps. Inner journey, wisdom, transformation. Kai stepped through the temple's heavy wooden door, after Horan, and the roar of the mountain wind outside vanished instantly. It was as if time itself had held its breath within the boundaries of this place. Inside, the warm, deep, faintly sweet scent of incense drifted through the air, mingling with the aroma of old bamboo tea soaked into the walls. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath Kai's feet, but even that sound carried the rhythm of years, gentle and unintrusive. The temple held no ornaments, only simplicity, only order, only an invisible discipline echoing through the silence. Kai's shoulders loosened without his permission, yet the voices of his shadow still circled in his mind. You don't belong here. You're wasting your time. This silence will swallow you. The inner voice hovered like a mosquito, stabbing its needle into the tender parts of his soul again and again. Kai wanted to silence it but couldn't. Shadows do not die easily. Horan, as if sensing the storm inside the young traveler, walked ahead and pointed to a single stone placed in the center of the temple. The stone was small, gray, and ordinary. The old master did not show it like a king's crown, but like a parent showing a child how to take their first step. Your task for today, he said, is simply to move this stone. Kai couldn't respond. A sudden disappointment speared through him. He had walked through the mountain for days. He had suffered to climb out of the dark wells of his own soul. And now the master was telling him to move a stone? Just this? This simple? This ordinary? For a split second, a spark that resembled anger lit in Kai's eyes. Is that all? He asked, the disappointment leaking into his voice. Horan's expression didn't change. He looked as though he were staring at a stone surface, as though Kai's emotional turmoil mattered no more than wind. Great changes, the master said, always begin with small actions. You cannot move the sun if you cannot lift a stone. Kai knelt before the stone. He placed his palms on its cold surface. The stone wasn't heavy. He lifted it, moved it. That was all. And the mocking voice within him laughed. Seriously? Is this it? The first step of your grand transformation? A stone? You think something this small will change you? Kai felt ashamed, because deep down he was thinking the same thing. Horan sensed the tremor in the young man's mind. He went to a stick of incense and gently turned it. The smoke shifted direction, forming a thin line stretching toward Kai's face. The mind, said Horan, belittles small victories because the ego doesn't like them. The ego wants grand gestures, but the brain, especially the limbic system where habits take root, is reshaped through small repetitions. Kai looked up. For the first time, the master's words echoed inside him. The loops your brain builds to protect you, Horan continued, do not break all at once. When it sees small actions, it realizes there's no threat. Resistance softens, pathways open. This stone is the first marker of that path. As Kai crouched beside the stone, a new awareness flickered within him. Something shifted, very small, but noticeable. A warmth he couldn't name yet. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps hope, perhaps an unfamiliar light slipping through years of hopelessness. But his shadow did not give up. Ridiculous. This is a game. You'll quit again tomorrow. Kai's jaw tightened. A flame rose inside him, but for the first time, it wasn't aimed at himself. It was aimed at his shadow. Why do you resist so much? He whispered to himself. No answer came. The shadow, as always, was silent, sly, persistent. Horan knelt beside the stone. He didn't touch it. He simply sat next to it. "Do not fight the voice inside you," he said. "See it, know it, but do not act according to it. This is the secret of Kaizen, not defeating resistance, but shrinking it." Kai inhaled deeply. The incense smoke filled his chest, warming his breath. The stone's coldness no longer felt like an enemy. It was beginning to feel like a symbol of a new beginning. One stone, Kai thought. One step, one breath, one repetition. Horan stood and walked toward the dim corner of the temple. As he did, he spoke. "For years, you expected a miracle to change you. Loud decisions, grand transformations. But humans do not heal through grand decisions. They heal through small movements." Kai remained kneeling beside the stone. He thought about his life, the decisions he made and broke, the promises that lasted a night, the habits he started with fire and abandoned with silence. Each had begun big and ended small. Perhaps the problem had been in the way he began. The shadow voice whispered again, "It still won't work." This time, Kai responded only with a deep breath. He didn't resist, didn't argue. He simply heard it and continued. He lifted the stone once more, a small movement, but this time it was deliberate. This time, it was an act of will. Horan's voice echoed through the temple walls. Today, a stone. Tomorrow, a step. Then a breath. Then a day. Then a life. For a moment, Kai felt the silence around him, the warm smoke of the incense, the softness of the wooden floor, the faint hum of the wind pressing against the walls outside. All of it felt like a rhythm. All of it felt like a beginning. Somewhere behind the temple walls, in a place unseen, a small piece of Kai's inner resistance broke off and fell away. It was a moment too subtle to notice, but powerful in meaning. As Kai rose beside the stone, a tiny flame flickered in his eyes. A small flame, but one that could illuminate a mountain. Inner journey, wisdom, transformation. When the mountain night settled over the temple, darkness wrapped around Kai like a cloak. The silence deepened, the air grew colder, and the wind sharpened. The incense no longer burned. Only its faint, ghost-like scent clung to the temple walls. Kai stepped onto the outer veranda. Moonlight fell onto the wooden floor like a thin blade, stretching the mountain's shadow into the shape of a giant creature. Horan had said nothing that night. The silence created a strange tension inside Kai, for the shadow voices echoed stronger in the dark. "You're tired again. You'll fail again. You won't last through tomorrow. Why do you bother?" Kai didn't try to silence them, but each word struck his inner walls like a sharp scratch. Suddenly, images from his past rose from the darkness, promises left unfinished, broken vows, failed diets, abandoned morning routines, nights he returned to smoking and hated himself for it, moments he couldn't keep his word in relationships. All of them closed in on him like shadows. Kai's throat tightened. At that moment, Horan emerged from the darkness, approaching with slow, heavy steps. He carried no light, made no sound, yet the moon's pale glow faintly revealed the lines of the master's face. In his hand was a thin notebook. Its cover was a deep navy, nearly black. No title, only a single line as fine as a bamboo strand. Horan extended the notebook toward Kai. "This," he said, "is the Shadow Journal." Kai hesitated as he took it. His breath quickened for a moment. It felt as if the master was not handing him a notebook, but a mirror that would strip his soul bare. "The shadow," said Horan, "grows when you avoid it. It strengthens when you do not look at it. The roots of bad habits lie in darkness. That is why night training begins." Kai opened the notebook and saw the pages were empty, completely blank, white as untouched snow, as if the master expected him to write a new life from nothing. But Horan continued. "Every night," he said in a firm but calm voice, "you will write your shadow. Not only your mistakes, but your triggers. Not only what you did, but why you did it. Not just the moment you fell, but the part of you that felt the fall." The wind hit Kai's face. The darkness trembled. Moonlight fell across his own shadow, long, thin, stretching like an old scar. "And how does this connect with Kaizen?" Kai asked with a slight shiver. Horan answered without narrowing his eyes, without emotion. 1%. Kai didn't understand. "When you try to rip a root out all at once," the master said, "the body resists, the mind flees, the spirit shuts down. But if you give that root 1% of light each day, the darkness retreats." At that moment, the moonlight brightened, sharpening the features of Horan's face for a heartbeat. The master pointed toward the vast darkness beyond the temple. "You," he said, "broke yourself countless times by trying to change all at once. You tried to kill your bad habits through battle, but change gained through war does not last. Kaizen does not fight. Kaizen erodes." Kai took a deep breath. The shadow voice spoke inside him. "What's the point of writing? What will it change? You'll quit again." Kai gripped the notebook. "I won't quit this time," he whispered, though he didn't fully believe himself. Horan leaned slightly, not touching Kai, just standing near. "The solution," said the master, "is not to slice transformation in one great cut. The solution is to give yourself a micro-victory each day." Kai closed his eyes. A sudden image flashed in his mind. A dark forest, and on the ground a small candle. Small, but steady, as if it were the only light standing before his shadow. He placed the notebook on his knees and began, for the first time, to write his darkness. His hand trembled. The words came slowly. The sentences were broken but true. "Today, I thought I would fall into the same cycle again. When I entered the temple, the voice inside me screamed that I wouldn't make it. I lifted the stone, but it felt small. I don't trust myself." As he wrote, something happened. The shadow voice retreated, very little, very softly, but noticeably. Kai's eyes filled, because for the first time, by putting his shadow onto paper, he felt it shrink. Horan watched silently from behind. "This," the master said, "is the first 1% step toward the root of your bad habit. Tomorrow you will write again, every night, each time just 1% deeper, because the repetition of small changes dissolves great darkness." Kai kept writing. As he did, the shape of his inner darkness became clearer. It was no longer just a frightening mist, but something defined, and a person does not fight what they understand. They transform it. As the night deepened, Kai wrote his past, his fears, his triggers, his escapes. As the pages filled, the tight spaces of his mind slowly widened. At that moment, Horan spoke one last time. "The shadow grows when you run from it. When you shine light on it, it changes shape. But if you follow it with small steps, it eventually learns to walk with you." Kai looked up. Horan had already dissolved back into the darkness. The wind had softened, and the night over the temple had grown a little warmer. And that night, Kai won a small victory. No one saw it. No one applauded. But in the heart of a broken man, it was the first spark that learned to breathe again. Inner journey, wisdom, transformation. Before dawn even appeared on the horizon, the air above the temple was wrapped in a gray mist. The cold had seeped deep into the pores of the stone floor. The silence felt so heavy. It was as if the entire mountain was holding its breath. When Kai stepped onto the veranda after a sleepless night, Horan was already there, standing like a shadow suspended in meditation. The master held a small bell in his hand. Even without ringing, it radiated discipline. When Kai approached, Horan lifted his head, and the first command cut through the silence like a blade. "The ritual begins." Kai swallowed. The master's eyes were sharper than the morning cold. From this day forward, Horan said, you will wake at the same time every morning. You will drink the same water. You will lift the same stone. Repetition is the backbone of transformation. Kai nodded briefly. It sounded easy, but the weight in Horan's voice whispered that change was never that simple. The master raised his hand and pointed toward the narrow path behind the temple. Kai would return to the same stone as on his first day, but this time, it wasn't just about the stone. The path was cold. The wet soil clung to Kai's feet. When he reached the stone, the master spoke from behind. The stone of continuity. Kai turned. This stone? Yes, the master said. Small. Insignificant, perhaps. Like the beginning of a habit. Kai lifted the stone, just as easy as the first day. Today, Horan said, is easy. Kai frowned. And tomorrow? Tomorrow your mind will fight you. Kai set the stone down. The master appeared beside him. His bright eyes fell upon the stone. Discipline, he said, is not the muscle of the body, but of the mind. Muscles grow stronger when challenged. The mind flees when challenged. Kai took a deep breath. The master gestured. Now, come with me. They walked up the path together. The mountain grew harsher, the wind colder. Even the birds had not yet woken. Kai's chest grew heavier with each step. Sleeplessness and mental fatigue had merged. Horan suddenly stopped. In front of them was a small stone platform. On it rested a single cup of water. The ritual ground, the master said. Kai lifted the cup. It held only a single sip of water. You will drink this every morning, Horan said. Why? Because the purpose of the ritual is not to grow stronger. It is to begin again. Kai tried to understand, but his thoughts were foggy. Horan stepped closer and tapped Kai's chest lightly with his finger. Your mind wakes in chaos. The way to cut off the energy of chaos is with a spark of order. Kai slowly drank the water. It was cold, sharp like a blade sliding down his throat. In that moment, the remnants of sleep and mental haze disappeared. Horan nodded. Now lift the stone. Kai returned to the stone. Moments ago, it had felt easy, but now his hands were trembling. He lifted it, but his breath quickened. The master watched. Today you lifted it, he said. Tomorrow your mind will whisper, what does it matter if you skip one day? Then you will skip another. The flow breaks. The cycle begins. Kai stared at the stone's cold surface. So small rituals prevent great collapses. Horan responded with a sharp look. No, small rituals transform great collapses. Every morning, the same action sends a signal of stability to the mind. Neuroscience says repetitive micro-movements reduce decision fatigue. That clears space for bigger habits. Kai's eyes widened. So lifting a stone every morning is retraining my brain? The mind, Horan said, is far simpler than you think. It believes whatever it repeats. The first action you take each morning determines who you become. Kai sat on the stone. The master stood behind him, hands clasped, like a shadow, a rock, unmoving discipline. And what if I fail? Kai asked. You will, Horan said without a trace of hesitation. Kaizen is not about never falling. It is about returning after the fall. Kai fell silent. The master continued. What breaks discipline is not falling. It is failing to return. Kai felt the weight of those words down his spine. It was as if all the guilt he had carried for years began to dissolve inside that single sentence. Horan suddenly turned and walked toward the large stone platform at the end of the path. Kai followed. The air here was colder, the wind harsher. In the center of the platform stood a larger stone, surrounded by white markings. What is this? Kai asked. The continuity trial. Kai swallowed. The master stepped beside the stone. One morning you will come, he said, and you will not be able to lift it. Why? Because your mind will stop you. That is when the real battle begins. Kai tensed further. The master seemed to sense this and continued. Every bad habit casts a shadow, but the real danger is not the size of the shadow. It is the repeated act of running from it. Kai lowered his head. I always ran. Kaizen stops the running, Horan said. Each ritual is a line you draw against escape. Each morning you draw that line again. Kai slowly stood. So what do I do in this trial? Horan touched the stone gently. You will only touch it. You will not lift it. Your mind will want to lift it, but you will touch and release. Kai was stunned. This? Why? Because discipline is not only the ability to do, it is the ability not to do. Kai felt the power of that sentence pierce through him like an arrow. Horan stepped back. Kai, he said, today is the first day of the ritual. One day you will succeed. One day you will fall. In Kaizen, what matters is the journey, the number of times you return, not the number of times you fall. The wind suddenly shifted, tossing Kai's hair. It was as if the mountain itself bore witness to the lesson. In that moment, something changed inside Kai. Small, silent, but real. For the first time, he felt a tiny notch carved into the root of his bad habits. A feeling so small it might have vanished if he hadn't noticed it. But it was there. Maybe I can do this. Horan turned, a faint shadow of a smile crossing his face. This is the beginning of transformation, he said. A small hope. Kai watched him. The morning ritual might have been nothing more than a stone, a sip of water, and a few steps, but it left an echo within him. Inner journey, wisdom, transformation. When Kai stepped into the temple courtyard that night, the sky looked torn open. The moon hung like a thin blade over the darkness, and the scent of incense drifting on the wind moved through the air like the whisper of an ancient prophecy. The shadows slipping between the wooden pillars merged with the shadows of Kai's old habits in his mind, and everything seemed like two eyes watching him from within himself. The silence was heavy, yet inside it beat a hidden pulse, a pulse that echoed deep in Kai's heart, the first spark of the discipline he had neglected for years. Inner journey. When Kai closed his eyes, a dark door opened. He fell into that old, foreign, yet familiar room that housed the center of his bad habits, the ones he thought he had buried for years. This room wasn't a real place, but the living core of that shadow labyrinth within his mind. The walls were covered in black mist, and twisted whispers drifted inside it. You'll fail again. Stop. Give up. Kai recognized these voices. They were his own, echoes of self-destruction, the invisible strings that sabotaged every attempt he had ever made. But this time something within Kai didn't tremble or retreat. He simply observed, as if the first true confrontation Horan had waited years for had finally begun. Transformation. Kai walked slowly through the shadow. With every step, a memory emerged from the past, promises left unfinished, disciplines he could not maintain, weeks drowned in fleeting pleasures, cycles he could never break. As Kai watched these scenes, his heart grew heavy, but he did not turn back, for he had begun to understand the silent truth of Kaizen. Small steps can close the doors of great destruction. Inner journey. The mist gradually thinned, and Kai saw the figure sitting in the darkest corner. This figure was his shadow, the living form of the bad habits he had fed for years. Its eyes were hollow, its breath slow, and in a mocking whisper it said, I am your creation. You cannot destroy me, for I was born from your weakness. Kai took a deep breath. He remembered Horan's voice. A shadow grows as long as it is rejected. It dissolves the moment it is accepted. Kai took another step. Instead of shrinking, the shadow expanded, stretched, and began to close over him. But Kai did not run. As the storm within him turned into calm, he whispered only one sentence. I see you. Wisdom, the shadow paused. For the first time in years, it seemed to lose strength. A small crack appeared inside the mist. Kai reached out his hand with a steady awareness. When he touched the shadow's face, the image shattered with a brittle snap, revealing a small, fragile child within. Kai understood that this was his younger, frightened self. The source of his bad habits was not punishment, but lack. When Kai embraced this small being, the room began to shine. What he had fled from for years was merely an echo of his own vulnerability. Transformation required not a fight, but acceptance. Transformation. When Kai opened his eyes, the sky was brighter, the wind lighter. Inside his spirit, a new voice seemed to rise. The powerful vibration created by one small, steady step. That was the great secret of Kaizen, that a tiny change could open a massive doorway in the brain's neurological pathways. Once that door opened, the chains of habit began to break. Inner journey. When Kai stepped back, the shadow was gone. Only a faint golden light remained. Before he could understand what it was, the world around him shifted, and he found himself once more in the temple courtyard. The night air smelled deeper, the incense smoke felt more meaningful, and the cold of the stone no longer hurt him. It strengthened him. Wisdom. As Kai walked through the courtyard, he looked for Horan, but the master was nowhere to be seen. This absence didn't frighten him. Strangely, it soothed him. Horan leaving him alone meant the true mastery test had arrived. Kai looked up at the sky and whispered to himself, "From now on, I choose my steps." Transformation. When Kai stood still, the wind brushed gently against his face. This wind felt like the invisible teaching of Kaizen. Not harsh, not oppressive, but constant. When Kai felt this steady flow, he sensed the power that tiny steps carried. For great transformation does not begin with an explosion, but with unseen micro movements. Inner journey. Kai had now learned not to defeat his shadow, but to transform it. He freed himself not by fighting his bad habits, but by giving them meaning. This was the essence of Kaizen, building inner order, not inner war. Wisdom. Kai bowed his head, pressed his palms together, and quietly repeated the promise he made to himself. Today, 1%. Tomorrow, 1% more. Inner journey. When Kai stood at the center of the courtyard that night, a new fire burned in his chest. This fire wasn't the fire of victory, but the fire of acceptance. The war with the shadow had ended. For the shadow was no longer an enemy, only a teacher, a beginning point. Transformation. In the final breath of the night, Kai experienced a deep clarity, the invisible revolution created by small steps when they accumulate. At that moment, the door of Kaizen opened forever. Inner journey. This night was Kai's breaking point. From here on, nothing would ever be the same. When Kai woke with the first light of dawn, there was an indescribable lightness in his body and a profound stillness in his soul. All the pieces he thought he had lost while passing through his shadow during the night had returned, but not in their old form. They had become purified, sharpened, aware. The wooden floor of the temple felt warmer beneath his feet, the steam rising from the teapot clearer, and the scent of pine carried by the wind deeper. It was as if the world had breathed last night with Kai and was now exhaling anew with him. Inner journey. As Kai walked toward the courtyard, his eyes searched for Horan. The master's absence was a test, but for the first time, Kai did not feel anxious about not finding him, because one of Kaizen's quietest teachings was this: the true master disappears one day, for the teaching has already become you. For the first time, Kai felt this truth so deeply. Wisdom. When he stood at the center of the courtyard, The coldness of the stone no longer reminded him of resistance, but radiated a clear sense of determination. Kai placed his hands on his knees, closed his eyes, and followed his breath. Every breath was a decision, every decision a repetition, every repetition a transformation. This was the essence of Kaizen. Not revolution, but repetition. Not explosion, but continuity. Not a big step, but repeated small steps. Transformation. When Kai opened his eyes, Horan silently appeared from the corridor behind him. His steps were soft, yet they echoed in Kai's heart like a drum. The old master's eyes were softer, deeper this time. When he reached Kai, he performed no ceremony, made no dramatic gesture. He simply placed a hand on Kai's shoulder and spoke the short, sharp sentence carried away by the wind. Kaizen is now you. Wisdom Kai felt the weight of this sentence. The warmth that entered through his shoulder spread to his heart, and he understood that he was no longer a student. Discipline had ceased to be a task and become a natural movement of his being. Horan pointed to a flat stone at the edge of the courtyard. It was the first stone used at the beginning of the Kaizen rituals, the single stone Kai had lifted on the day he entered the temple. The master walked toward it in silence. Transformation, he brushed the stone with his hand and turned to Kai. Every beginning is small, but the small, when repeated correctly, gives birth to the great. His voice was as light as the tone of the wind. For the first time, Kai saw this stone with new eyes. It was no longer an object, but the record of a journey. Inner journey. Horan gave Kai a task that looked like a final test, but was in truth a seal. Do not return this stone to its place. Carry it in your mind wherever you go. Once you learn to hold the Kaizen stone inside the human mind, no bad habit can chain you. Wisdom Kai bowed respectfully. The master's words were no longer a teaching, but a reality. Kai was not merely understanding, he was embodying. The place he stood was no longer a temple courtyard, but his own inner realm. The temple of Kaizen was now in his breath. Transformation as Horan stepped back and began walking toward the misty forest. Kai hesitated for a moment. He watched the master's silhouette grow smaller as it moved away. The wind, the branches of the pine trees, the first rays of the sun, everything pointed not to a master anymore, but to Kai's own inner voice. Kai had shifted from you to I. Inner journey, standing alone at the center of the courtyard. What passed through him was not triumph, but silence, simplicity. The thin line Zen master spoke of, being nothing and being everything at once. The shadow of his bad habits had not disappeared, but it had ceased to be a force that controlled him. It had become a conscious part of his growth. Wisdom, Kai fixed his eyes on the horizon. Before taking the first step into his new life, he repeated Kaizen's invisible vow to himself. One breath, one step, one repetition. Transformation. When Kai descended the mountain path, the world was the same, but he was no longer the same. The texture of the stones had not changed, yet Kai could now hear their silence. The wind blew the same, yet in its rhythm, Kai could feel the pulse of his discipline. Inner journey. With every step he took away from the temple, the chains of the habits that once suffocated him broke a little more, turned more into dust, lost more of their meaning. For Kai was no longer someone who rejected his shadow, but someone who knew how to walk with it. Wisdom. When he looked back at the temple from the mountainside for the last time, Horan was no longer visible, but Kai felt as if he could hear the master's words. Kaizen is not a life. It is a decision repeated in every breath. Transformation. After hearing these words, Kai took a deep breath and began walking toward his new self, transformed now, free now, the master of his own path, inner journey, and now. If this story is a doorway for you, I invite you to open it. For the continuation of this journey, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you cannot find the words to comment, Simply write 1% each day into each.